they were headed there, except to maybe to watch the grave. There was already some fear that the body of Jesus may be stolen and taken somewhere else, so that there wouldn't be any rumors of resurrection. There's another passage today, however, that I thought let me say it for the reason. Every year, I don't know for how long, I've tried to think about some other figure that is involved in the resurrection story and what their experience was. Because the only reason that you came up this early this morning and got out of bed, got here, was to somehow experience something a little bit differently than normal. Different than just coming to church on Sunday morning. We want to be immersed in the story of the resurrection. And I try to get into the mind, to the head, to the heart of different figures involving the resurrection. And quite honestly, what I've used for my personal meditation this year is to try to think about a man named Joseph, not the father of Jesus, who is probably already dead, but the Joseph that was from Arimathea. Do you know that name? We remember his name because of the tomb in which Jesus was led. And when you think about Joseph of Arimathea, we come to a passage that's very well known. It's Isaiah in the Old Testament. So we're talking about hundreds of years before Jesus came. But in the 53rd chapter, it's difficult to read the 53rd chapter of Isaiah without thinking, well, he's describing Jesus. He's telling about the Messiah to come. And there is one line in this passage, sometimes referred to as the man of sorrows passage in Isaiah, describing the grief and the sorrow and the burden that the Messiah carried. But there's one line in this 53rd chapter that, in a sense, points in the direction of all things of Joseph of Arimathea. So far ahead. So I want us to immerse ourselves today as much as possible in this state of quandary, of wonder, emotional roller coaster that the people surrounding Jesus and his death and his resurrection must have felt. Let's start just by taking a few moments, just quiet. Just to think about why we're here. Think about what we would like to experience in these few moments that we're together. And after a few minutes of silence, there's a song for me that's already becoming. It's like I have to hear this every Easter, and that's when Rady sings that song, Steal Away to Jesus. So I want to give you some silence. It may be one of the greatest gifts you've ever received. But a few moments of relative silence. I want you to think of yourself as a part of the resurrection story. somebody, I'll hold the flashlight on this Isaiah 53 passage. And would someone like to read that to us this morning?
See if I can see it.
Sandy, thank you.
Let's see if I can see it. Small print.
So the page comes from
Just 53 cents.
53. And only the first 10 verses. I'll hold the flashlight for you, or you may hold it.
I got it. Right there.
I want you to listen to this. Hundreds of years before Jesus comes, can you think of anyone besides Jesus that this is describing?
But oh, how few believe it. Who will listen? To whom will God reveal his saving power? In God's eyes, he was like a tender green shoot sprouting from a root in dry and sterile ground. But in our eyes, there was no attractiveness at all, nothing to make us want him. We despised him and rejected him. A man of sorrows, pardon me, acquainted with bitterest grief, we turned our backs on him and looked the other way when he went by. He was despised and we didn't care, yet it was our grief he bore, our sorrows that weighed him down, and we thought his troubles were a punishment from God for his sins, his own sins. But he was wounded and bruised for our sins. He was beaten that we might have peace. He was lashed and we were healed. We, every one of us, have strayed away like sheep. We who left God's paths to follow our own, yet God laid on him the guilt and sins of every one of us. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he never said a word. He was brought as a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before her shearers is dumb, so he stood silent before the ones condemning him. From prison and trial they led him away to his death. But who among the people of that day realized it was their sins that he was dying for, and that he was suffering their punishment? He was buried like a criminal, but in a rich man's grave. But he had done no wrong, and had never spoken an evil word. But it was the Lord's good plan to bruise him and fill him with grief. However, when his soul has been made an offering for sin, then he shall have a multitude of children, many heirs. He shall live again, and God's program shall prosper in his hands.
Isn't that a shocking passage to think about? One of the most memorable verses, he was bruised for our transgressions, and with his stripes we are healed. We're made well because he bore our sickness. He bore our wounds. He is with us. But that little passage, a rich man's tomb, a rich man's grave, he was buried. Who do we know about Joseph? Here's something that we know about Joseph Arimathea. I don't think until this year I would have been able to tell you this off the top of my head. But Joseph is actually mentioned in 3 of the Synoptic Gospels. His name is brought up as owning the tomb in which Jesus was buried. We know a little bit about him. First of all, we know that he was a very wealthy person, thus that he had a tomb at all. And in some ways it is an assumption that this was Joseph's tomb. Evidently, he had moved to Jerusalem from Arimathea. We don't really know where that town is. It's a name of a town, but we don't know exactly where Arimathea is. It's a vague about what little community that was. And you have to understand that most what we call towns today were probably less than Ledbetter. I mean, most of the rural towns. You had large cities like Jerusalem, but even when we say large cities like Jerusalem, it would be nothing like what we know today as a large town. We're talking more like Brenham and those kinds of towns. So Joseph probably came from one of those very, very little, those tiny burgs out in the country, you know, with aspirations of something more. As about 99% of the people, he would have been described as one who was raised in poverty. I mean, because poverty was the norm, where people were just eking out a living in this dry and arid countryside. But moved to Jerusalem, evidently at some point, but still known, that, you know, the Joseph that's from Arimathea, that guy. And he moved to Jerusalem because he became a part of the council, which means he was a part of the Sanhedrin, the court that made important decisions like crucifixion and moral decisions and interpretations of scriptures and all kinds of decisions. They got together to make that as a group. He was a member of that. And so he sat in on this Sanhedrin council that started talking, listen, we got to get this guy. He's interfering in our ideas about who we are as religious people. He's telling the people something different. He's underneath it was that he was interfering with their income streams in the way that they ran the temple and sold things so that they could get more money. He was interfering with a lot of what just gave people in the Sanhedrin their power and their privilege to be over other people. It's not an unfamiliar story at all. I would say to all of us, always be careful when you threaten someone else's power or privilege or their prosperity. Always be careful, because people like to defend those things. And yet this was a man of sorrow and grief, but they had to get him. And Joseph of Arimathea, he dissented. He didn't go along. For some reason, maybe like an acquaintance that he had named Nicodemus, who came to Jesus by night. Remember? He came to Jesus by night. Maybe because he was a little bit afraid of being seen in the daylight with Jesus. But he came to Jesus and he said, Jesus, what do we have to do to inherit eternal life? Serious question. And Jesus said, well, you have to be born of the Spirit, not just a physical birth, not just the physicality of our being, but there's a birth of spirit. There's something that comes alive in us, deep inside of us, and it's the only way we can describe it is being born all over again. We're born again. And Nicodemus was a friend of Joseph of Arimathea. How did those two get together? Because both of them, when they heard Jesus talk, when they heard about what he was doing, they kind of leaned over in that direction. They were greatly influenced. And it was those two guys, these two friends, one a rich guy from Arimathea, and one Nicodemus, a very, very prominent person of the Pharisees, who came and said to Pilate, look, tomorrow is the Sabbath. We can't do it on the Sabbath. We've got to get the body in a tomb today. Can we have the body of Jesus? This is unlike crucifixion in any other time. where they like to leave the body up as long as possible to make them an example. So people walk by and they say, "Ooh, I'm not going to," because it was a method of political dissent as much as anything. It wasn't about crucifying robbers or murder. It was really about political dissent, and they wanted that person to be up there. But Pilate, maybe because of Pilate's wife went to him and said, "Look, don't have anything, please, don't have anything to do with the death of this guy. He's a good man." And all the way through, does he? We look on Wednesday nights, we've been looking at Pilate a lot. And on so many occasions, Pilate would say, "Look, we don't have to kill this guy. Look, I don't find anything wrong with it." Three people on the outside of Jesus' real sphere of interpersonal relationships, these three people had something to do in this. Pilate said, "Yeah, you can take the body down. We don't have to leave it up there." Pilate is the one who wrote that little sign in 3 different languages. "King of the Jews." They even went to him and said, "Hey, don't put King of the Jews up there. Don't write that. Say, he said he was the King of the Jews." And Pilate said, "I've written what I've written, and I'm not changing it." And Joseph of Arimathea, I don't mean to, I'm not trying to be gruesome here. But you tell me, one of my meditations, how did these 2 old guys get Jesus down off the cross? You tell me. I don't know. Because you don't, 2 old guys, they don't lift the cross out of the hole. I don't think. It's too heavy. But one of them brought, I'm just surmising, a small little ladder maybe that they could prop up against the side of the cross. And the task was for Joseph to climb up that little ladder and pull his hands with a nail, probably went in at the wrist, because that's where it would support the body. His body is already completely let go. That's why you die of crucifixion as much as anything. Suffocation. You can't get a deep breath anymore. And Joseph climbs up there. The blood has barely had time to dry. And Joseph is struggling to pull the tendons over the nail head. And I mean, what is Joseph feeling in his heart? He struggles with the other hand, and the body of Jesus falls like dead weight on his shoulder. And he's now covered in the residue of death. And he brings Jesus down from the cross. Nicodemus brought 75 pounds of ointment. And I don't know exactly how that's a tradition, but somehow either the linen cloth is soaked or it's just kind of placed over the body. And it looks like Joseph had purchased a large linen shroud to wrap the body in. And they then covered his head. And all along, Joseph knowing, you know, I was doing a funeral plan for myself, but the tomb has been dug. Let's go put him there. And they went and they placed Jesus' body on what is usually a kind of, like in our shower where you have a place to sit down sometimes, you know. It's just on kind of a rock table, and they placed his tomb there, his body there in that tomb. And then to seal it, they pushed a large stone in front of the opening. And in some measure, hope died. He did. For just a minute, be there, helping in the burial. Because I think I can make some sort of promise. If you're there in the burial, you're going to be even more excited about what happens next. Let's just think about that in silence and watch the sun continue. He was bruised for our iniquity. Every palm that slapped his face, we would be healed. Every fist that struck his jaw, little by little we were getting well. Every flogging, every whip that struck his back, we were being made whole. next morning, early before sunrise, the next chapter is written, or in last week's story, the king still had one more move, and it wasn't just to put Jesus in the tomb. And so my meditation and my thoughts were this week, who finally got word to Joseph that the tomb was empty? I don't know if the Bible leaves that. And in my juvenile kind of thinking, they came and told him, and Joseph, in his older years, having acquired and come to possess so many of the things that were supposed to make you happy and fulfilled, when he heard the tomb was empty, Joseph had no trouble at all stepping into the spiritual reality that God was doing something really special in the world. I kind of imagine when they told him, I kind of imagine Joseph going, yeah! There's a tradition that has kind of built up, and it's the way we kind of bring this to closure. The tradition is that someone will say, he is risen, and the response is, he is risen indeed. In fact, in reality, he is risen indeed. And so if I were to say those words today, I'll hand back to you the responsibility of response. I'm telling you, these are some of the greatest words you'll ever hear in your life. He is risen.
He is risen indeed.
He sure has. Dana and Rady, and thank you for kind of putting all the chairs up, and brewing coffee and getting things ready for us this morning. And so from now and through the rest of the day, I hope you'll travel the memories of resurrection with Joseph of Arimathea and kind of reflect. This is one of my meditations this week, kind of reflect on the conversation. They met up again. Jesus talked to Joseph again. I'm certain. It's kind of like, if for no other reason, Jesus comes to Joseph and says, "Hey, Joseph, thanks a million for the use of the tomb." Spend some of the day kind of thinking about the conversation between Jesus and Joseph, what it might have been like, and what they said to one another, maybe in the quiet of an afternoon, because it helps put you in that story. Gosh, it's great to be here on a morning like this. A great not because we can see the sun. This is kind of like some of the morning, some of the years, isn't it? Right. Some years we can't see the sun, and some years this is beautiful too. Well, this is beautiful in a different kind of way. God greatly bless your resurrected souls today as you celebrate the resurrection of Jesus.